Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gavinsky's Tutorials. In this video today I'm going to look at Buzz Zone, the new synth for desktop and iOS by Toybox. I'm looking here at the iOS version loaded as an AUV3 inside AUM, but it's basically identical to the desktop version. Now this is a hybrid synth, so it's got two synth engines, a wavetable engine and a sample engine. And the UI, when you first look at it, you might think there's not really that much going on, but there are little triangles here and there that can open up a lot of different options. So actually this synth is a lot deeper than it looks at first glance. So I'll start today's video with a few examples of it in action, and then we'll have a quick overview of what it is and what it does. Followed by a more detailed walk through the UI, going into a fair bit of detail. I'll cover most of the stuff that's in the manual and do audio examples as well where necessary. And we just want to say before we get started, huge thanks to Toybox for sponsoring this. But, even in sponsored videos, I'm never shy of giving constructive criticism where necessary. So at the end of the video, I'll have a little recap and mention things that I think could be improved. But I will say right off the bat, I really like this. I think it's going to be a very popular release, just like Thump 1 was. It sounds really fantastic, and you can do some very interesting sound design with it. So let's start by listening to a few audio examples. So lovely rich sound. Now, the first thing you notice when you look at the screen is this middle section. And there we have an oscilloscope, and then in front of that we have one of these multi-segment envelopes. Now, in this case, this is the envelope for the unison knob. Now, note that the envelopes only correspond to the main knobs here. The tweaking knobs on the bottom row do not have their own envelopes. Now, back up here, we can double tap to add nodes. If we double tap on a node again, we can remove it, and we can just drag them about like this. Another thing that's good to know in terms of control is if you want to enter an exact value, you can double tap on something. For example, here I'm double tapping on the pitch value, and you can just enter a numerical value. Worth mentioning also, on Mac or on iPad, you can press the Command key as long as you've got a keyboard attached. Press the Command key and drag a knob, and that will give you fine control. On Windows, you press the Alt key and move the knob to get fine control. Now, another useful keyboard shortcut, if you tap on one of these triangle menus and you select something different, that menu closes, and then if I wanted to just select the next one below, for example here, I'd have to open that menu up and tap again. But there's also a shortcut, so you can press Control and tap here, and it will just go to the next option on the list, and you can press Shift and tap here, and that will go back on the list. super useful. Now, looking at the knobs up at the top, we have a global speed control for the envelopes, a release amount, as in how long it's going to take for the sound to fade when you release your finger after playing a note. Here, a global pitch control. Here, stereo width control. And here, a control for the depth of a selected effect. So you have various types of reverb and then things like chorus, phaser, flanger, wave folder, distortion, and echo. Now, you can only choose one of these, right? So that's a bit of a limitation, I would say. For example, you can't have a reverb and a chorus, or you can't have, you know, a phaser and a wave folder. I personally don't really mind that much because I usually use my own, you know, effect plugins after synth apps because you just have a lot more control. So it doesn't really bother me, but it is something worth mentioning, and it might bother some people. Over here, we have undo and redo buttons. We can toggle on an internal keyboard, whether that is visible or not. Now, let's look at the speed knob. So this is pretty cool. So let's just increase the speed there, and you can see the time in milliseconds. And you can watch that little white dot going along to follow where we are in the envelope. Now, let's just go to a loop. So you can see here the icon is lit up, so it's on loop mode here, as was the last one, by the way. Now here we can speed up the loop by dragging up and down. So you see at the moment it's just on its, you know, basic speed, 1 times multiplier, and now it's double speed. And so we can take that all the way up to times 32, and we can take it all the way down to divided by 32. So let's just take it back up to a little bit fiddly. Also can't tap on that one to enter a value directly. Now, if we click on the arrow here, we have various modes. So we have a re-trigger mode is on here. So every time I press a key, it's going to go back to the start of the envelope. Or we can have it just free, and it's just going to do its own thing regardless of my MIDI note input. So there's not going to be any re-triggering. We can lock it to host tempo. And these are really cool. So if we choose pitch, what will happen now? Let me play in a note. Here, 1 cycle of the oscillator is going to determine the speed of a loop. So basically, when I play higher notes, it's going to loop faster. And if I play lower notes, it's going to loop slower. And chaos will just somewhat randomly jump around positions. You see it kind of oscillating back and forth there. And here I'm just increasing the speed over there. Now if we click this cog up on the top left, we have options like whether or not an incoming MIDI note will reset the phase of the oscillators, whether filter cutoff will follow the pitch of incoming notes, whether samples will be repitched depending on the pitch of incoming notes, whether we're using high quality filters or lower quality that would reduce the CPU load. We can turn on legato, control glide amount, and we have some control over polyphony. Note that it's maximum 5-note polyphony. You also have options to stack 3 notes or stack 5 notes for a fatter sound. Now over here on the right, we can control how much the incoming note velocity will be related to volume. For example, if I turn that down, then it doesn't matter what velocity the notes I play in are, it's all going to be the same volume in here. If I put this up, then it's going to be a lot more sensitive to velocity. Now, here we can control a bunch of things. Now, it looks, when you first look at it, like we've only got velocity to filter setting here, which means to what extent the velocity of the incoming notes will modulate the filter cutoff. But you can see we've actually got a load of different things that we can choose for velocity to modulate. And here we can choose whether velocity will increase that value or decrease it. So we just tap on that to change that. So then here we have 2 options for mod wheel, modulating different destinations. Here we have aftertouch as a source, and again, a lot of control over what it can do. And here, pitch wheel. So pitch wheel as a source and then set the destination. And we can control the range of the pitch bend knob. Now, one thing I would say is, I think it's a pity that there's not some kind of matrix system for these, because you can only use velocity as a source for two destinations. But if there was a matrix system, you could have a whole bunch of different destinations for velocity, different destinations for mod wheel, aftertouch, and pitch wheel. Now let's take a look at randomizing and mutating. So let me just latch a note here. So if I press this, currently what's going to happen is it's going to randomize. Now, if the last thing I had selected in here was mutate instead of randomize, instead we would be getting mutations. Now, one thing you might notice here is while it's randomizing, it's not actually randomizing the envelopes. But if you have access to a keyboard, then if you press Control while you tap, let me press Control and tap. Now you can see that the envelopes are being randomized. Now, mutate will give you more subtle results than randomizing. And note that if you press the Shift key while hitting this, it will always mutate rather than randomize, even if the last thing you selected inside the preset browser was randomize as an option. And so here we just have our main output level for the synth, and here some settings. We already looked at some of them. It has its own little quite neat MIDI learn implementation in there. Basically, if you are sending MIDI from a controller into it and you tweak a knob, then the CC value of whatever the knob is sending out will appear up near the top of the UI, and you just drag that number onto whatever it is that you want to control with that knob. You can also in here do things like turn off the oscilloscope so that it might save you a little bit of CPU if you're struggling. And now let's head down to the real interesting part, looking at the synth and sample engines. So the default preset we access here, init preset. I do wish there was just a little thing you could tap right here on the UI instead of having to menu dive here. Now, when you open up the default patch, synth is on, the sample engine is also on, but no sample is loaded. So actually we're only hearing the synth engine. And we choose different waveforms here, and there are a lot of them. So I'm just gonna, I don't know why that's clicking out there. I'm just gonna demo a few of them. I'll just flick through very quickly. Okay, so you get the idea. Now, here, remember that this is the main pitch knob, and this envelope here, at the moment we're seeing that pitch envelope. And down here, what we have here, this is a knob for the level of the harmony oscillator in general. Now it sometimes has other functions. It depends what we pick here. So if we look at this, again, I don't want to get lost in the weeds, but some of them are just related to traditional intervals. So for example, if we have the first one here, a fifth, that will pitch the harmony oscillator up an octave plus 1/5. If we want, we could have them in unison, and then this would act as a detune. We could have it down an octave. We could have a fixed interval. We'll demo these in a minute. We could use the harmony oscillator to do FM, or we can use an oscillator in the background to do AM. We can use another, I think it uses the sub oscillator to do ring mod. We can do filter FM, where the oscillator in the background will modulate the filter cutoff. And we have sub and a lower sub. So let's just hear what those sound like. So I'm just going to latch a note. Beautiful sound. So here, this is doing the detune. Now again, if you really want to get more detail on those, you can take a look at the manual. So here we have our unison. And here we're setting the level of the detuning, or the amount of the detuning. If we set this to unison, then here we can also detune that oscillator. Let's bring it up a bit. So here we're controlling the position of the main oscillator in the wavetable. And then if we bring in the harmony oscillator, then we can adjust the position of the harmony oscillator. Now we'll look at the filter section in more detail in a minute, but basically here we have our filter, and here we have filter resonance. But this resonance knob will have different functions in some of these options. Here we have our FM depth, and here we control the pitch of the modulation oscillator. Really beautiful. Here we have our level. Now remember, you could always modulate that as well. And here we control the amount of FM feedback. So if we look at this little triangle, we see that we actually have some stuff in here that is not filter. For example, there's a bit crusher, wave folder, chorus, ring mod, and so on. So for some things here, this resonance knob will actually control something else, and you can get full details of that in the manual. Let's just have a little play around. So this is the 4-pole filter. Let's just sweep that with full resonance. I think it sounds great. So I hope you agree, those sound fantastic. So I'm just going to take a very, very brief look at the sample section. We're getting near the end of the video. And I've got a patch loaded here, 80s rap snare. So we can see here that the synth is also on. So let's just turn that off. And so now we're just hearing the sample. And so if I play, say, a lower note, you can hear that as I play higher, the pitch is also increasing. So that is because here we've got samples follow pitch. So if we turn that off, and if we turn off this filters follow pitch, and now we play, you can hear that now that sample is identical. If I turn on filters follow pitch, but I don't turn on sample follows pitch, then you can hear that the filter is opening up more when we play those higher notes. But the sample itself is still not being repitched. But if we click samples follow pitch, now we really notice that this sample is higher than when I play here or here. Now we can also just adjust the pitch of the sample with the pitch knob. We could modulate that by drawing in an envelope. We can detune the sound with the detune knob there. We have the filter section, just that it doesn't have all the filter types that the Synth Engine has, but it does have a vocoder section, so you can do vocoder type sounds with this as well. Put in a vocal sample, for example. And then here again, we're just level and the FM feedback. Here when you have loop mode turned on, which we looked at earlier in the video, you also have an option to turn on this, which will just restart the sample when the envelope loops back to the start. But this wouldn't make any difference for a short sample like this anyway, just to mention it though. So we're at the end of the video, everyone. A good time to smash the like button and so on if you haven't. Maybe write a comment if you've got time. Help the algorithm a little bit. So in terms of my opinion of this synth, I think it's beautiful sounding, really, really rich, really gnarly sound. You know, the filters and everything in it sound really good to me. The bit crushing effect, you know, the FM, the ring mod, like everything sounds just fantastic. So it's also really fun to play around with having these different envelopes that you can draw in to modulate various main parameters of the synth. And as mentioned earlier, you know, when you tap on these little triangles, there's a lot of options here. It does a lot more than appears at first glance. So, you know, you add in all this stuff, all the cool presets, you're getting a lot of value for money here, I think. But in terms of what could be improved, there's a few things. So I'd say one thing would be that it's a pity that you can only choose one effect or reverb or whatever. I think it would be good if you could use more than one. As I mentioned earlier in the video, it's not really a big deal for me because I often use external effects with apps. But it would still be nice if you could use, for example, a phaser and distortion at the same time. Currently you can't, you've got to choose one. So that's one thing that could be improved. Another thing that could be improved is when you size this small, it is basically impossible for me anyway to read. And it's partly because of the small font size, and it's also maybe because of, I don't know, the lack of contrast in the background color and the font color. So that's maybe another little area that could be improved. The next main thing I would say applies more to iOS. So there are certain things that I mentioned in the video that you need to use a keyboard if you want to do. And the most crucial one is for finer control of knobs. So fine control can be very important for certain things, like dialing in exact pitch values, for example. Now, I don't really mind this because I always pretty much use my iPad with a keyboard attached anyway. But, and you know, for people who use desktop or whatever, they won't mind because they've always got a keyboard. But there are some people who use their iPad or iPhone without a keyboard, and currently they just don't have any way to do fine control of knobs because they don't have a keyboard to hit that shortcut key that you need to press while you're twiddling the knob to get that fine control, whatever it is, Alt, Option, Control, I can't remember now. So to me, I think everything that currently needs a keyboard shortcut to do, there should definitely be a way to do it without a keyboard as well. And then I think my last main suggestion would be there's quite a lot of space up here, but there's quite a lot of stuff hidden away in menus. So it would kind of, to me, make sense, you know, like all these buttons like copy, envelope, paste, flip, reverse, and so on, clear, you know, why couldn't they be up here rather than hidden away in a menu here, requiring a tap to get in, and then, you know, you've got to scroll through that list and try and find them. So, you know, I would kind of like to see some more controls added to this upper part of the UI where there's a lot of space. Like, for example, here we just have one dice, which is used to either randomize or mutate. And what it does will be based on what you last chose here, as mentioned earlier. So if you last chose randomize here, then now when you click this dice, it's always going to randomize. It's not going to mutate. If you previously chose mutate as the last option in there, then now it's going to mutate instead of randomize. I also mentioned that there's a keyboard shortcut that you can use to get it to mutate, even if the last thing you selected in here was randomize. But look, with all this space, why not just have 3 dice? Have one for randomize, have one for mutate, and have one for randomize, and also randomize the envelopes. Because if you remember, currently you need to use a shortcut key to get it to do that. So yeah, that would basically be my last suggestion. So thanks again anyway to Toybox for sponsoring this video. If you're a fan of the channel, well, if you're a developer, for example, it's a great way to support the channel. Sponsor videos, whether it's from me, other YouTubers, or whatever. We really need that because this is such a small niche. Nobody's making any money from YouTube. We really need more developers to offer sponsored video opportunities. And if you're a viewer and you've got a bit of spare money, if you can support me or other YouTubers in this space that you like on Patreon, that would be brilliant. So anyway, thank you so much everyone for getting to the end of the video. Congratulations. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks everyone for your support. It's really appreciated. Okay, take it easy. Cheers.